We're going to be looking at the labor force as made the news. Unemployment has gone up in August 2025 compared to any other month this year, possibly mainly because of tariffs. However, it's not certain. Apparently, there's a total of 18 million Canadians, of which 14.7 are in the service industry and 1.6 are unemployed. When one looks at those numbers, one has to think, well, who's actually doing the work and producing products? Statistics Canada reports that 4.5 million public sector employees in total, and that would include federal, provincial, and municipal government jobs, education, and healthcare. And again, those jobs really aren't producing any economic activity other than turning dollars over. So it's a very difficult economic situation that Canada finds itself in going into the latter half of 2025. Well, Trump fired his director in charge of the unemployment numbers because he didn't like them. I don't think you can get away with that in Canada. But the problem comes down to how do you count the unemployed? There's a lot of people in the job market that have just quit looking for work altogether. There's a lot of people in the job market that are unemployable but would like to be employed. And there's a lot of people that are retired that are back in the job market, making it pretty much impossible to get a good handle on these numbers. But what I find rather shocking is the goods producing industries in Canada only only employs 3 million people. And if you're comparing that to service producing industries of almost 15 million people, which is pretty much two-thirds of the Canadian workforce, and another 4.5 million in the public sector, it shows that the foundation for your economy is rather weak, because what we're doing is, we're buying services. You're going to fast food restaurants. You're going to the yeah. Well, here's an example. According to the CIBC report about labor shortages in Canada's agricultural sector, which we touched upon with the temporary foreign workers, apparently there is the Canada's agricultural food sector produces over 150 billion in gross domestic product, supports 2.3 million jobs across farming, food processing, retail, and food services. Apparently, in 2023, the shortage of workers cost the industry $3 billion, $3.5 billion in lost sales. Now, the thing is about the agricultural industry is it's a foundation, a base industry, one which creates wealth to a large degree. In other words, you're producing something real. It's not like you're shuffling paper back and forth as you would be doing if you were selling real estate or insurance or working in a brokerage office, or you were a lawyer or an accountant or some other person that's yeah, you're creating real wealth in a tangible product versus what could be considered fictional wealth if you're just trading shares. And so with Canada's job market so top heavy with government workers that are just providing services to the taxpayers are supporting them. It seems like that kind of system could easily tip over. I look at the number of people working in the oil patch, for example, mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction. That at one time was the foundation of Canada's wealth. There's only 213,000 people in that sector, 37,000 in logging and forestry support, yet we're having to subsidize that industry to the tune of billions because of US tariffs. Mining and quarrying, the oil and gas sector in Canada is the number one beneficiary of subsidies, government subsidies, yet they really aren't that many people actually directly working in those industries. Construction, 1.1 million construction manufacturers, 1.5 million manufacturing. That at least is primary economics. The ones that aren't are when you get into things like finance and insurance, real estate and rental leasing, professional scientific services, management of companies and enterprises, administrative support. None of those industries are primary industries. So I think moving forward, we're going to have to get more into the type of businesses that create friction in our society between various groups. There's people out there that are anti-pipeline. There's people out there that are anti-mining. There's people out there that just dislike any kind of progress whatsoever, and I can sympathize with them. I consider myself a conservative, but I would like to conserve the water. I would like to conserve the air. I would like to conserve the environment. But unfortunately, those goals seem to be in conflict with what is necessary in order to support an overburdened civil service, basically. If we look at what the U.S. is now doing under Trump, for example, the U.S. government has a 15% revenue sharing agreement with NetVidya with respect to exports to China, which means
Isn't
that the
that kind
government,
of the Crown Corporation now?
well,
Socialist?
well, well, they're actually taking a 10% share in Intel. So what that tells you is that the U.S. government is moving into the private sector and demanding a part of the action. But if we did that in Canada, as we once did with Petro Canada, we were labeled as socialists.
Well, I think we have to look at, the job creation concept that actually crown corporations are easier and better to operate for essential services and resource services. When you start looking at how Norway is modeled, where the Norwegian government owns the corporations and then farms out deals with other private sector, it has worked out substantially better for the people of the country, where they see the benefits of free education, free health care, better paying jobs. They don't have to work their butts to the bones and have no time for their family and no time for recreation. And when you don't have time for family and recreations, it means you don't have time to go out and spend money on services like entertainment, recreation, um, things like that, or even private teaching to better your kids' education. You don't have the money or the time to do that when you're working your knuckles to the bones. And that's the capitalists want you to keep believing that working your knuckles to the bones to making them ultra rich is the best for you as a job. But sorry, folks, that isn't the way it works. And a lot of European countries have good models from which we can learn from and improve from.
Well, you have to wonder why Republicans, who are supposedly free enterprisers, would be buying shares in a private company. And none of that, they're buying
They didn't
private.
buy, they were gifted because they threatened extortion if they didn't get the shares, is my understanding.
Well, there's actually they're getting, it's costing them $11.1 billion, and they're getting 433.3 million shares of non-voting stock at $20.47 a piece. Now, here's the odd thing is, on paper, the U.S. government's already earned $1.9 billion on that purchase, because the mere fact that the government put money into the company raised the value of the company's stock. So
Right.
it's an interesting issue here. I wonder which government insiders also got in on the purchasing, and made their positions a little richer. But the thing is, you have to look at this and go, first of all, why would you buy non-voting stock? Like, you'd think if you're going to buy 10% of a company, you'd want to at least have some say in what the company is doing. And of course, it was all as a result of trade with China, where
Right.
the government, Trump, wants a piece of the trade with China. So I don't know what's behind all that. All I know is that it's not customary to do that sort of thing in Canada. it would be wise for the government to buy into one of the major oil and gas producers, an integrated company, so that they
Well,
could at least trace where the money is going and where the losses are and where the gains are. Right now, you're depending on what the companies publish, but why are they the most subsidized corporations in Canada when they have the
and we
largest
don't get
profit margin?
benefit from it. Our
Well,
money's
yeah,
paying for it, and we're not getting the return on these corporate welfare checks we're handing out. That's the
yeah,
big issue.
you got to
You,
wonder, yeah, why would that be so, right? It's in Canada, the oil and gas subsidies totaled approximately almost 30 billion in 2024.
yeah,
That's a lot of
a lot of
money.
money. And that doesn't
But
include the subsidies of abandoned well cleanup, drilling subsidies, and all that sort of stuff that are given provincially, I don't think.
well, it does include the investment in the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which I think was one of the smarter investments Canada made, although people disagree, saying that the price went through the roof because the Canadian
Well,
government was backing it. But it's
in the business model, it pays for itself in 20 years, and Alberta benefit because now they get a higher price for their oil because it's not unidirectional to the U.S., so they've had to been paying more for the oil, so that helped Albertans with higher royalties. There's a lot of benefit, but had Alberta not sold its Crown Corporation pipeline company, we would be getting $10 a barrel transmission costs, which would have been straight into the coffers, and that is a significant amount of money because the royalty on $50 barrel of oil is about the same as $10 transmission fee. So Alberta lost half its revenue by selling the Crown Corporation pipeline. And what's the maintenance costs on pipelines? Not a whole lot once they're built. How hard are they to operate? Well, you got operators. No big deal to operate that business. It's a steady model for business. So why in the hell isn't that being made a crown corporation federally to increase the revenue to federal government coffers, and we can monitor the whole industry better and determine the best directional flow of where our oil should be going and profiting as taxpayers every barrel that leaves the country.
I'd like to know how Alberta can add crown royalty reductions valued at an average of 1.16 billion a year.
Yeah, and we're in a
Like that.
deficit and we can't even get health care, or we're going to be charged $100 for a COVID shot because they're too broke.
Well, Alberta's not broke. They're just packing the money away for some reason. They're the only province running a multi-billion-dollar asset a
Yeah, but
surplus.
they're gifting it to foreign companies, and it's not staying in the asset base that they claim they have. Like the Heritage Trust Fund has depreciating assets that they're inflating the values on, as far as I can see, and we're not as wealthy a province as we suggest we are because we provide some of the highest corporate welfare to these businesses raping and pillaging us.
Well, Alberta's government surplus is a record 8.3 billion. There's no excuse for
No,
having
now
lineups
that's
at the
changed.
hospital.
They're saying they're running at a deficit because the price of oil dropped.
Of course, they say that.
You know.
They say that because they've already given away the cow, right? Now they're
Oh
saying,
yeah.
oh, there's no milk. It's
Well,
it's ridiculous. Of course, they're crying now, and the reason they're crying is
they
it
want to
doesn't.
privatize healthcare.
Well, not only they want to privatize healthcare, but they have this separation anxiety hanging over their head. So
Right.
if you show that Alberta may not be a have province in the future, it may kind of end those kind of discussions.
Yeah, or facilitate that they need to separate because Ottawa ripped us off. It wasn't the Alberta government giving away all the assets, it was the federal government. Well, folks, federal government doesn't control the oil, that's provincial. Take your heads out of your arses and quit believing the gaslighting that's coming from the provincial government.
Well, one of the issues that they're going to have in the future is oil and gas is like a declining resource. Every time you pull out a barrel, the resource gets smaller. If you don't get your economic value out of each and every barrel produced, you're going to find that you don't have any in the future. It's like a reverse annuity. You're losing money every time you produce a
But
barrel unless
but
you
I hope our
maximize the
audience
return.
sees that there's an overlap between jobs, employment, government inefficiencies, efficiencies that affect your bottom line. And they all seem to have a systemic problem, is that they are all policies that are in support of capitalists, which are not democratic capitalists. They are capitalists looking out for themselves and their own interests. And it's putting a burden on us as our population increases to make it so that people can have a good living and lifestyle. And we're losing on the lifestyle and quality of living end because the wealthy are getting all the benefits, and now we really have a working class people that live paycheck to paycheck for many, many people. So yeah, I just find that we need to, if we're going to come up with solutions, we actually have to look at the bigger picture and see how it all ties together.
Well, you'll find too that the economy is going into a bit of a skid, not only with the job losses,
Right.
but specifically foreclosure rates, which aren't widely published. But one of the things that they look at is delinquency rates. And in Ontario, they're rising uh, from historically low levels to a frequency rate of 0.24% in the first quarter of 2025, which is up a significant 71% increase from the same period the previous year. Now, another issue on top of all of that is that there's a huge number of mortgages that are coming due this year and in the
Yeah,
following year. And so what that's going to do is, depending on what the rates are, it's going to increase the burden on people to maintain their housing in
definitely.
a
And that's
bad
a
job
concern.
market. So it's going to be a tough.
Well, in 2007, 2008, in that housing market crash, I knew people that had an acreage and they couldn't pay their mortgage. They went 2.5 years without paying their mortgage. The bank wasn't going to foreclose on them or do anything about it because the government and the institutions all figured it was better to lay back and then force the foreclosure later. So when the economy crashed, they didn't want to move on it, so they sort of put it in a stalled status. And then after the housing industry picked up a bit, then they foreclosed on them because they couldn't make the back payment of the 2.5 years, and then forced to sell the property. And the bank made money versus losing money by that, and the people lived for free for 2.5 years. They didn't come out ahead, but they didn't get any real ding on their credit or anything. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen in this housing market crisis, because I don't think real estate can go up. It can only go down in price. I mean, in the 1979 recession to 1983, my grandparents' house dropped almost 50% in value, and that is probably a reality to where the housing market could and should be sitting, as a 50% drop when this market crunch hits and the bubble bursts. People's income have not gone up to keep up with inflation since the 1980s, and your living wage is not really a living wage, and the prices have all gone up right across the board. So something has to give on the correction. If you go, like one of the things, like I was saying earlier, was disposable income, right? You see that there's a lack of disposable income in the majority of people. Around Calgary, we have the largest number of multimillionaires in the country, probably because of the real estate values and the oil jobs. And if you go out to the entertainment industry, you see that they're struggling, from comedy shows to live entertainment to bands to nightclubs. I mean, per capita, Calgary has a really diminishing entertainment community compared to even Edmonton. And that's because the disposable income is being eaten up by all the capitalists raising the prices for housing, for your retail outlets, for businesses, operation costs going through the roof. And as a result, you're seeing the slow deterioration of the spending mechanisms that can afford that, which points to a bubble about to burst as far as I can see. But I may be wrong, but definitely you see something going on majorly in the last 6 months where there's been a significant drop in people spending money or going out and attending events.
Well, the interesting thing is in the first quarter of this year, the highest delinquency rates on mortgages are in Newfoundland and Saskatoon and Regina.
Yeah.
So one is in the fishing industry, which is a primary industry, and the other one is in the agricultural industry, which is a primary industry.
Well,
And regardless,
Regina and Saskatoon are actually heavy oil industry too, and potash, and they have a lot of other mining resources like helium, and they're actually quite diverse economy in Saskatchewan. So if they're having problems in Regina and Saskatoon where they have low population and higher income, that should be your canary in the mine. We got a problem coming, unfortunately.
well, apparently in 2021, Saskatchewan held over 43% of Canada's cultivated farmland.
Yeah.
So when you look at tariffs on agricultural products, you can see where that would cause a bit of a downturn, at least in the farming sector. But
Well, now
they
we
don't.
go back to this wheat board being dismantled by Harper and Folvier. Had the wheat board been enacted right now, it would have shielded the farmers from these instant losses on no market for their seed, and they would have got paid a guaranteed income while the wheat board worked on redistribution contracts to move the grain to other areas of the world, and they wouldn't be experiencing half the hardships. So their farmers is where your promotion of getting rid of these controls has just hurt a lot of farmers. And I can't feel too much sorry for you because I was not in support of getting rid of the wheat board and such because of these potential disasters to the farming industry that this type of marketing board was set up to alleviate and guarantee you income while they dealt with problems on an international world scale. You snooze, you lose. So,
Again, it's interesting. It's hard to tell from statistics what really is going on in
yes,
Saskatchewan. For example, agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting only make up 12% of the GDP. So,
they have a lot of oil. I mean, if you check the oil reserves, they might even have more of the same as Alberta. They have all the tar sands in the north, except in the northern Saskatchewan, it's shale. They have uranium deposits, huge deposits. They have gold. They have, I think there's lithium even in Saskatchewan, and they have potash, huge potash resources,
well, oil and
and they have
gas is
helium.
25%.
Yeah,
So it's it's
so
it's over. It's the largest single asset, but you have to wonder why are the foreclosure rates up? The price of oil didn't drop that much.
well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's like a canary in a mine. It's very strong economy in Saskatchewan, and if they're showing signs of a problem, there's probably a bigger systemic problem that's going to hit the rest of Canada too. So it might just be the first one to show the signs that are coming. I don't know.
Well, it says, the news from Global, uh, many Canadians are having financial troubles, according to a new report from Equifax. They're saying that the delinquency rate in Ontario rose to 0.24%, which is the 72% increase from the same time last year. So it's an interesting indicator. If foreclosures are going up, that means houses aren't selling when people are in deficient
Yeah.
positions, which means that there's a downward pressure for people to sell their houses. And when the mortgage renewals come up, it's going to be more difficult to get a renewal if you're unemployed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a snowball effect, and it goes back to job losses on the rise. I mean, this is the snowball effect. It doesn't take a whole lot to start the little snowball rolling down the mountain to become a big avalanche. And that's where I see we're at right now in the economy. And it's a good thing we have Carney leading the way because he understands the economic engines and he's put a lot of effort into market redistribution to try to stabilize the economy because when you start looking into the U.S. economy and job losses, you're starting to see some pretty horrendous numbers coming out of the U.S. and that is definitely going to impact us up here. So I don't know how to spell it to you folks, but I don't see anything but a market correction coming and it's not going to be pleasant.
Well, in the mortgage industry, they're stating that mortgage holders renewing mortgages between 2025 and 2026 are likely to see an increase in their monthly payments, especially if they had a locked in 5-year fixed rate mortgage. So the rates are going to go up. With that, I presume the foreclosures are going to go up. And with that, I would say the demand for houses is going to go down. So
Well, the
it's a,
other issue is their property taxes always go up. And the property taxes are education taxes, the municipal taxes. So they have a split provincial and municipal tax collection system. I think it's the same as out there as here that the municipality collects the taxes for the provincial government. And those have all gone up significantly, like 6 to 7% annually, which over time starts to eat into the disposable income too. If all the costs of living are going up 6, 7, 8%, and your wages are holding the same or going up 1% or 2%, you're falling behind the eight ball. It's only a small percentage of people that get the inflationary rate increases to their wages and that's very few. And there's a lot of job jumping in the younger generations because when they're employed, they can be headhunted by other companies and get a higher wage by jumping ship. So you see the jumping ship scenario going on in the younger generation to get the higher wages. There's no such thing as job security because there seems to be an inability for corporations to understand that they got to keep up with inflation with their wages. So the job issue and job losses are just the catalysts that might cause the big avalanche on the economy, taking a big bury on the piling up of all these costs and not seeing the equivalent in wage increase. I mean, look at the CEOs and corporate profit. It's at a record high in history. It's never been so high. Well, that's coming off the sweat and labor of the working class.
well, the other thing that adds on to all of this, we've now committed to spend more money on our military. And you have to look at that and go,
Ah,
well, first of all, in a time of financial issues, do we really need a larger military? And if we are going to spend money on the military, is it going to be with respect to Canadian products? In other words, why are we even considering buying billions of dollars of U.S. aircraft? It seems ridiculous to me. I love to
well,
see
and
them at air shows, but
I know in the uncertainty in the world, I do see the need for military spending. But like you said, I'd rather see spending on military production in Canada. I sent in a thing for the one corporation saying I'd do a crown corporation deal with the federal government to bring in production of drones for Alberta, where there are a lot of Ukraine descendants, 100 some thousand just in Edmonton area or something like that, or 300,000. I can't remember what the exact number is. And we as Canadians should be investing in this drone technology that Ukraine has and learn all about it. And like we have the technology with the technology for computers. So why wouldn't we invest in building drone technology in Canada to help Ukraine or help any other country instead of giving the money to the U.S.? And the U.S. cut a deal with Ukraine to buy up their drone technology because they fell behind on the technology. So I agree with you. It's where you're spending your money that counts. And supporting local jobs is one of the ones that we should be doing. I mean, I've submitted lots of proposals for job creation, like an oil refinery complex for Calgary, poo-pooed by federal, provincial, and municipal government and the people. And the same thing applies with all sorts of proposals that they could improve their job stability in Canada. And every time I submit them, they just throw them in the waste paper basket. It's not what the wealthy want, so it's not in the interests of government.
Well, I don't think we don't need to enhance our military so that we can bomb motorboats in the Caribbean. The Americans.
Drone technology is a military technology that can be used to monitor forest fires. It can be used to monitor activities. It's not just about a military tool. If we built our own drone systems that can be modified for military, there's a lot of domestic use for drones right now. And especially in a country the size of Canada, we can monitor wildlife habitat better with drone technology. We can do all sorts of stuff. So why would you invest in something that's smart for commercial use as well as a potential for military use that we may never ever need to use, but it's there. So that's called dual purpose business that can help the economy. And that's why I suggested it, because it was not just for military, it has a lot of domestic applications that would benefit Canada. And
build water bombers.
Military spending to kiss the ass of Trump, saying, well, we'll spend this way, and prove that it's not military spending.
So, build water bombers, save Canada's forests. That has all sorts of dual purposes, from limiting the amount of
build them here
global warming.
We have to build them here in Canada.
They've started a factory outside of Calgary.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, the trouble is the Canadian market will not receive one for the next 4 years because of the international demand. Now, why did they ever stop building them? Somebody had to look at this and go, this is the only real effective water bomber in the world. Why would you allow that to slip between your fingers and go out of business? It's crazy. There's I can't understand the excuse for that.
Well, me neither. I mean, that's the problem, is we're only able to discuss that there has to be more rational thought, and when it's not on the media's agenda to deal with certain issues, then they're never dealt with because the politicians owe their jobs to the wealthy and the media. So that's one of the problems when you're not really having a democracy, folks. It's he with the money tells you what you're going to get for services, jobs, and entertainment, I guess. You're getting us for entertainment right now. Live with it, folks.
Well, we can waste somebody's time just as much as anybody else.
Yeah. Well, hey, like I put on comedy shows, and you can come see the live comedy shows. I'm not in it, so you're good there. I make sure they're professionals, but
But let me give you the example with respect to the water bombers. The Manitoba government has put up 80 million in a down payment for three new water bombers to be built in Calgary. They will not be ready until 2031 and 2032 fire seasons. So, your $80 million is gone, and you sit and wait while your forests burn. And you would think there'd be some way to pump some cash into that business in order to produce more of these
well, you
important.
got to create more skilled jobs. You got to have access to more land and area and facilities, and the cost of
What's an easy?
those would cost you another $80 million to expand the capabilities.
Hey, it's
And who
better.
knows what terms they got the money on, and it could have been just a cover up for a bailout. And is that corporation going to be in business 3, 4 years from now? You gotta look at all the details, and the system that they build to for corporate welfare is in favor of the corporations, not in favor of government money. They see the government as a cow to be milked, and that's exactly what goes on in 90% of the cases. So,
Well, they're so desperate for water bombers that Newfoundland and Labrador have started to repair their water bombers that have been out of service since 2018.
holy
So
crap.
they're cannibalizing the older planes in order to keep some of the planes flying. Now, how come somebody couldn't have foreseen this? And it's not like it's an invisible threat. The smoke goes all the way from Alberta to Boston, Massachusetts, and everybody in between is covered in smoke. So it has to be essentially viewed as a crisis, if not in health,
Well, I don't
but
know.
in the
They
destruction.
may be looking at it like manpower on the ground is better than, you know, flyovers dropping water. And there's a debate on that, I'm sure, that ground crews is job creation program, and ground crews can make fire barriers quicker and easier than a plane dropping water every 15, 20 minutes. I mean, you throw water on a fire, and a few minutes later, the fire's back to roaring because it burns off the water. So I see both sides of the coin, that maybe they do like the firefighters on the ground and it's a job creation program.
Well,
I'm going with that.
I can I can tell you by the amount of smoke that went across North America, it's not a very effective way of fighting fires.
No.
You
And
know, just look.
we don't have the fire towers in operation we used to have, and the crews set up to get rid of the lightning strike fires as fast as possible. We don't have that infrastructure set up anymore, and there's a lot we're not doing on the fire front that can be done to make it so the fires don't get away in areas we know where if a fire starts, it's a big problem. But that's another issue. That's incompetency at government levels and for multiple reasons.
So, anyways, the massive American buildup around Venezuela, if you can call it that, resulted in their first victory in blowing up a speedboat that they say was loaded with drugs on the way to the U.S. And of course, they have no further real information as to who was on the boat, or, who, where they were going, or what they were doing. And they know it doesn't matter because the boat's gone and the evidence was blown up. But you have to wonder about uh,
That's got to
the
violate
legality.
international law
Of course it does.
and U.S.
But
law.
since that has ever been a holdback, I mean, you look at the Israelis assassinating and the Americans assisting them in assassinating all those scientists in Iran recently. Like nobody cared about that. There's no foundation in international law
Well,
in order to allow them to assassinate people. They just do it all the time.
Donald Trump made waves on Sunday when he gave a cryptic response to reporters' question. A reporter over the weekend asked the president, "Are you considering attacking the cartels inside of Venezuela?" Because remember, he claims that the cartel leader is actually the president of Venezuela, and he
Yeah.
put a $50 million bounty on his head. Trump replied, well, you're going to find out. So I guess our predictions of feet on the grounds in Venezuela, Trump has plans to do exactly that because he wants to have an ongoing war with the U.S. that he can claim as an internal drug war, that there are troops on the ground in the U.S., therefore we cannot hold any elections in the U.S. And that is coming to fruition, folks. I think our prediction is coming about, especially that they blew up a fishing boat with people in it. And it's obvious there was no guns. There was no room for drugs. And it was obvious that a missile was sent in there to blow it to heck for a reason. I don't know what they used, but it was definitely blown up to get rid of any evidence. It
Well,
was a
the
staged false flag.
here's the interesting thing as well. Rubio is touted as the first Hispanic government, whatever. You'd wonder why he would be, bombing his own people. Like, like what
Well, they're
it
not
just
his
goes.
people. He came from Cuba, didn't he?
No, but they're still basically Spanish. They're still Hispanic.
Mm,
Doesn't matter
yeah.
if they come from Mexico, Venezuela, or Cuba.
Well, you'd think it wouldn't matter, but obviously there is animosities between countries.
Now the similarities, and for people I'm sure don't remember, the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964, where the Americans created a false flag incident in order to justify the attack on Vietnam. So I imagine that there are some historical scholars in Trump's cabinet that are looking at these past incidences and going, "Hey, we need to come up with something, right? We need an incursion from Venezuela into Colombia, or we need, a drug cartel running drugs to the U.S. We need a reason, and blowing a motorboat up isn't quite enough. So I'm anticipating that there will be other incidences, especially when the international community doesn't get together and condemn what they're doing. It's like in Israel, when if people would have condemned what the Israelis were doing 2 years ago, you wouldn't have this gross genocide and ethnic
Well,
cleansing
the
today.
latest one is they claimed that Hamas was using a civilian tower apartment as a hideout, and they were going to blow it up. So they gave 20-minute warning. All you civilians get the heck out, and then blow it up. Well, just a second here. How stupid do you think we are? If there was Hamas in there, you just told Hamas to get out too. Like there was no Hamas in there. You could surround the building with a few military vehicles and you could have rooted out all the Hamas in the building you wanted. No, they wanted to totally demolish and blow the building to hell in a handbasket, and they did. And why? Leveling of the ground so they can build their own luxury resorts in the area. Like, come on, it's get rid of all the residential buildings, and then there's no place for people to live. You broke them over the last year. There's nobody got any money to build anything, so now you're going to export the people out of the country. And then, did you get a load of that? Netanyahu stated on the news today or yesterday that it's Hamas that's preventing people from leaving Gaza. Well, who the hell do you think we're that stupid? It's the Israeli army isn't letting the food trucks in, not Hamas as you claimed. And if people want to leave the war zone that they're getting killed in, they're being held in by the Israeli army. They're not being let out. And Hamas has sweet tweet to do with that. So a lot of gaslighting going on.
Where are the sanctions?
Oh,
Where
they're
is the
not going to
international
happen.
community? If we have sanctions against Cuba that go back to 1964, which is ridiculous, we've got sanctions against
Anybody speaks
Venezuela.
out against the Israelis are labeled as terrorists and are sanctioned themselves. And, we're borderline being sanctioned, I think, from just saying, hey, deal with, the fact that we do see genocide, and we think genocide is going on, and we want charges brought to verify it. And we don't believe the propaganda machine of the Israelis that are deflecting their actions on blaming Hamas, which has virtually been wiped out, according to Netanyahu a few months ago. He said they've whipped out all the leadership of Hamas. There's just the odd pocket of Hamas, and geez, you got enough military. There's no buildings. Go in and clean them right up. Go arrest Hamas. The people of Gaza would probably help you if you weren't shooting them dead on the food lines.
Well,
So, yeah,
the other thing is too, we have to clean up our linguistics. How can we call Israelis that steal Palestinian land settlers? They're,
yeah,
they're, yeah, our media has this jargon which has got a built-in bias that's hard to ignore. The settlers attack people's farms in the West Bank
yeah.
and in Gaza, and they're backed up by the military, and the world goes, oh well, we'll give some sanctions against the settlers. What are you going to sanction them for? You know that the Israeli government's not going to hold trials when they shoot and kill people and take their livestock and cut down their olive trees. Nothing's going to
Yeah,
happen.
well, I mean,
Nothing's going to happen. And so the world has to sanction Israel. Cut off the arms to begin with. If you have no bullets, if you have no bombs, this will end in a hurry. And
probably, but
well, no, because
U.S.
it's
isn't going to allow it, and they got Trump under their thumb. Birds of a feather flock together, and that's all there is to it.
it's the
So on
American
that note, I
military arm.
think we'll call it a wrap. Okay, you take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.